Hey vinyl community, welcome back to Mike's Vinyl Experience. Thank you all so much for being with me here today. I appreciate each and every one of you so very much. Today, super excited to share with you my thoughts on Mobile Fidelity's most recent release of Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Water, a 1970 release. Actually, it was the fifth and final studio album by Simon and Garfunkel. And it really turned out to be one of their greatest albums of all time, with really hits like The Boxer on it, Bridge Over Troubled Water, certainly one of the most iconic songs that Simon and Garfunkel ever did. Art Garfunkel's voice in that song is truly amazing and was such a classic song. Cecilia, another song on the album that really did so very well, and a favorite by many, including myself. Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Water, really one of my favorite albums really of all time, and certainly of Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel. Really enjoyed a lot of their albums, even in their solo career. Of course, Paul Simon had so darn many albums in his solo career, and Art Garfunkel had a few, not as many. But both really good musicians, great artists, did a lot of great work. Paul Simon's work is timeless. I believe he wrote the vast majority of the songs for both Simon and Garfunkel and their 5 albums. Really a great duo for sure. This album, when it was released in 1970, won 6 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year in 1971. So it was very well received. I remember listening to this album when I was really quite young. I wasn't very old in 1970 when this album came out, but both my sisters had this album, and I do remember hearing them play it quite often, and really became a huge fan of Simon and Garfunkel's really from a very young age. Well, let's move into and see what Mobile Fidelity has done with this album from 1970. As we all know, Mobile Fidelity, and darn it, you know, it's one of those things that I wish wouldn't have taken place, or at least I wish we would have had some information on it prior to releases being released a few years back. But Mobile Fidelity has introduced and is still using a digital DSD step in their work with re-releasing these great albums. And you know, I went through it and I had a lot of emotions when it first was, I remember watching Mike Esposito's YouTube channel when he interviewed some of the folks at Mobile Fidelity, and really kind of broke the news that yes, there is a digital step to these albums that have been redone, in particular to the Mobile Fidelity OneStep series. And I was very distraught, very upset, thinking that matter through and taking time to ponder that and getting over the anger of kind of, I guess, being lied to and not knowing that there was a digital step in this, thinking and kind of assuming and reading what we read that everything was analog sourced. So having known that, and that's all water under the bridge, and I'm not going to go into any more details than that, I kept all of my Mobile Fidelity OneSteps that they did. I could have traded them in, got my money back, so forth, and I know a lot of you did, and I don't blame you, I understand that, but I opted to keep them. And at the end of the day, for the very most part, not in all cases, but for the most part of the Mobile Fidelity OneSteps, they still sound good. They sounded good when I bought them, and they still sounded good after the knowledge that they had a DSD step to it. So I kind of kept them. So anyway, and I know a lot of people have very passionate feelings towards this, as did I, and as do I still, but what's happened has happened. It's water under the bridge. So moving forward, I still do buy Mobile Fidelity albums. In particular, I have bought some, not all, of their OneSteps, in particular the Van Halen OneSteps, which I think sound absolutely fantastic. I think they've been doing a great job with that. But I have been purchasing Mobile Fidelities. Granted, and for sure, not nearly like I used to. I just still have a little bit of a craw in my system about the digital step. Well, moving on to Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Water. This does have the DSD 256 step in it. What they did is they took the 1/4 inch, 15 inch per second analog master and copied that directly to DSD 256. Then they take that DSD 256 file and transfer that to their analog console, and then of course to the lathe. And so when they released this 33 RPM, you know, after all of this stuff, and the curiosity really got to me, how is Mobile Fidelity doing? How are they making these sound? How are they making them sound, I guess, is really the question. I do have the Mobile Fidelity OneStep version of the album, so curiosity got me. How will this sound in comparison, you know, to the Mobile Fidelity OneStep, this new 33 RPM? And then of course I've got a 1999 release, Classic Records release, that was mastered by Bernie Grundman as well, and I'll compare that to it. I do have an original release of the album, a 1970 original release somewhere in a box, and I remember when I got the Classic Records version of the album years and years ago, I did a comparison between the two, and obviously there was no comparison. The 1970 seemed a little bit muffled at the time, and so I really haven't included that in this comparison today. But really what Mobile Fidelity has done is indicated, taken this 256 file and transferred it to the console and to the lathe, and presented this album to us in 33 RPM. After listening to it for a few times, one of the things that was very, very prominent to me, and not that it's a terrible thing, but one of the things that was very obvious to me was that the high end, the upper end, was very much well extended. And in my listening experiences, that wasn't necessarily terrible or bad. In fact, on some of the songs on the album, it really, really worked. It really sounded good. Let me kind of just quickly show you the album. It's not a gatefold album. It is pressed on their super vinyl, which is really, if you can see that without a whole lot of glare, and sorry if there is really quiet. And that is one thing that I've always maintained, that I think the quietness of the vinyl really, really assists and helps us in achieving a higher degree or a higher fidelity, if you will, in these audiophile pressings. And so really listening to this album for several days before I actually did any comparisons, I was able to really determine that the top end is quite extended on this version of the album. And like I said before, and I'll get into my review of the album and kind of let you know how I feel about the songs on it, and then I'll do the comparison. But really, it really helped in some of the songs. It really, to me, sounded really quite good. There is a couple of songs, however, that I'll talk to you as I go through the songs really quick, that were a little bit, I don't know if I want to say troublesome, but were a little bit maybe on the bright side. And let me just kind of go through the songs really quick with you before we get to comparing this album and tell you what my thoughts were. On side one of the Mobile Fidelity 33 RPM Simon and Garfunkel Bridge Over Troubled Water is Bridge Over Troubled Water, probably their most iconic song that the duo ever did. It's been used in so many things. I mean, I remember back in the day going to the Consumer Electronics Show, this song was always a demo track being used by several different companies. It was mostly coming from this Classic Records version of the album, but it was always being used, and it sounded so wonderful. Art Garfunkel's voice is just amazing in this song. On this album, the sound it sounds excellent. The piano and Art Garfunkel's voice sounds excellent. The upper end seems to extend, not to the point where you want to turn the volume down, however, but you can tell that there is an upper end extension on this song. And really, for the song Bridge Over Troubled Water, it really works pretty good. It really does work. Going on to song 2, El Condor Pasa. This is a great song, by the way. This is one of my favorite songs on the album. The extended upper end works really, really well on this cut. I thought that it actually added a hint of detail that really wasn't present on some of the others. I thought it really, really worked well on this song for sure. Number 3 song on side 1, Cecilia, one of the great, great popular songs on the album, one of my favorites as well. Extended upper end, and it really did work on this track as well. The opening percussion, as you know, remember the opening of Cecilia, it sounds just great. It sounds excellent in detail. And I think that extended upper end really adds to that detail that you're hearing as you listen to it on this version of the album. Song 4 on side 1, Keep the Customer Satisfied. Now this song is probably one of the ones that I had a little bit of question on, and I kept listening to time and time again. And when I did my comparisons, this is one of the songs that I really listened to intently as I was doing the comparison. But on this version of the album, the Mobile Fidelity 33 RPM, this is really an upbeat song. It sounds really, really good. When the horns come in, they are really extended on the top end. And so with that extended top end, that boosted, sometimes those horns gets a little bit close to the sizzle point. You know, sizzle when things get a little too bright. It didn't get there, but it got close. It got close to where I didn't turn the volume down, but it was really getting up there a little bit close. And that really kind of, I don't know, I want to say ruined it for me on the track, but it really did have, you could just really tell that top end was really extended or boosted, if you will, in this song, Keep the Customer Satisfied. And so that was one of the songs that I really focused on. Moving on to track 4 on side 1. So Long, Frank Lloyd Wright. Great sounding track. The upper end extension on this song works really, really well. The vocals on this are great. The flute sounds fantastic. It really does give a little glimpse of a better detail with that extended upper end on some of these songs. Flipping over this album to side 2, The Boxer, probably another one of the best songs on the album and one of the best songs that those two ever did. Great sounding song, excellent guitar detail, fantastic sounding song. No issues here with the upper end. It sounds absolutely wonderful. Song number 2, Baby Driver. Excellent guitar. Vocals sound absolutely wonderful. Horns are nice without going over the top. The horns are actually a little bit better in this song than they were in Keep the Customer Satisfied. Song 3 on side 2, The Only Living Boy in New York. Excellent song and great sounding. Very nice detail. The drums on this track are excellent. They sound really good with very good detail, weight, and impact on the bottom end. Paul's vocals, as always, are wonderful. Track 4 on side 2, Why Don't You Write Me? Very nice vocals on this track, excellent percussion, and the horns on this track sound very, very good. Not getting over the top and getting too edgy or to the point where it sizzles. It didn't do that. It kept it close. You can tell that it's extended, but it really kept it where it needed to be without going over the top. 5th song on side 2, a live recording of Bye Bye Love. This was recorded 2 years prior to the album being released. I believe it was recorded at Iowa State University, if I'm not mistaken. Good sounding song. The live recording is the people, you can hear the people, obviously. They're not in the background, but they're very much up front. Sometimes that gets a little bright. I don't know that this mix that Mobile Fidelity's done really helps this song out. It doesn't tear it apart by any means. It's just pretty high, especially on the crowd noise. Moving on to song 6. Song for the Asking. Great sounding track, excellent guitar and vocals on this. It sounds absolutely wonderful. Excellent sounding song. Overall, I would say that the extended upper end in the Mobile Fidelity 33 RPM version of this album works mostly on this album. There are a couple of songs in particular I keep going back to keep the customer satisfied. Those horns really get really close to the sizzle point, but they don't get there. They get close, but they're not there. It doesn't go over the top. It doesn't become bright. It doesn't force you to reach for the volume control. At least it didn't for me. But there is that caveat with a couple songs on the album that I think that upper end, high end, might actually hinder a couple of the songs. I think it works for the vast majority of the album. I really do. I think it's a good presentation. I think it very mostly sounds really, really good. You know, and everybody's music taste is different. I mean, my taste, I think it actually works and it sounds pretty dang good. Some others might not think so. In particular, your sound system will have a huge role in the representation of this album. If your system lends a little bit on the bright side, you know, this album might not sound good to you. It might be a little over the top bright if the system is bright. If your system portrays that upper end a little bit brighter, a little bit, more extended on that top end. If you've got a darker system, this album would probably work wonderful and it would sound fantastic on a dark sounding system. You know, it reminds me, I had for about a year to a year and a half, I had an amplifier in my sound system. This is going back several years. It was a Krell KSA 100. It had a really dark presentation to the music. Not that it didn't have an extended top end or a good top end. It just really kind of, I guess if you will, it kind of mellowed that top end down. It was really more of a dark presentation. Bottom end, my gosh, the wallop on that Krell amplifier was unbelievable. Incredible. Mid-range was nice as well, but the top end was a little bit, I don't want to say flattened, but was a little bit mellowed out, a little bit reduced, if you will. On most albums, it sounded fine, but there were some albums that really didn't have a good upper top end that I kind of really didn't like on it. I remember trading that Krell KSA 100 in for a counterpoint SA220 amplifier. What a great amplifier that was. That was the best of both worlds. Had a very nice bottom end, not as good as the Krell, but it had a really smooth top end and mid-range that just, that's one of the amplifiers in my audiophile growing up years and you know, just, that's one of the amplifiers that I really wished I would have held on to, was the counterpoint SA220. I had that paired with the Sonic Frontiers SFL1 tube preamp as well. The combination of the two was fantastic. I really wish I would have held on to that amplifier. That was a great amplifier. Anyway, sorry to get off sidetrack, but if your system happens to be a little on the dark side, this album would really, really work for you. So how does this compare to the Mobile Fidelity OneStep that was released just a few years ago? Are they using the same DSD 256 file that they used on the OneStep for this album? I don't know. I would probably guess and assume that they are, but I'm really not sure. Let's take a peek. Now, one thing that I can tell you just really quickly, the OneStep is still available on Music Direct's website as of the time that I'm doing this video. Granted, it's a little bit higher in dollar amount than it was originally released. I think it was originally released at on $120 or $125. And I think they want either $150 or $200 for it. I'm not really sure. But the OneStep is readily available. Did they use the same 256 file? What we do know for sure is that both albums were sourced from a DSD 256 file. So I'm assuming that this was rendered from that same DSD 256 file. I don't know that for sure, but I would assume that it likely was. Well, how does it compare to the Mobile Fidelity OneStep version. The one thing that I can tell you that was absolutely immediate and clear to me is that the upper end on the OneStep isn't quite as extended as it is on this version of the 33 RPM version, at least to my ears and through my system. The OneStep was a little bit tamed back, a little bit more natural sounding, if you will. Not that it had a less detail, but the top end just on the song, Keep the Customer Satisfied, it didn't reach the sizzle or get even near the sizzle point as this one did. It got close, didn't hit it, but it got close to that sizzle point where it was over the top on the top end. This was a little bit, at least on my system, a little bit more laid back, a little bit more, I would dare say, natural sounding than it was on this one. And so really, and that was really kind of what I noticed throughout in comparing the OneStep with the 33 RPM recent release, is that the OneStep just had a little bit more tame, I guess that's probably a proper word, a little bit more tame top end. I thought the bottom end, the mid-range actually sounded very, very similar between the two. Very similar. I mean, really close. Bottom end, the drums, that we talked about earlier, was on The Only Living Boy in New York. The drums on this are just, between the two, it would be hard to distinguish the difference, to be honest. Which is a good thing, because this album is readily available and it's $60 on their super vinyl. This is also on their super vinyl, and it's really, really quiet and very, very nice. But this does have a much better, more tame upper end in comparison to this one. Much more natural sounding than this version on the upper end, even though that extended upper end on this one, I think, works really well on most of the cuts on the album. A couple of them, it just doesn't. But I do prefer the OneStep over the 33 RPM, just because it sounds a little more natural to me. So how does this album, this new release, 33 RPM by Mobile Fidelity, compare to the 1999 Classic Records release mastered by Bernie Grundman? Now I'm assuming, and don't have exact information on this, Discogs didn't really indicate it, but I'm assuming that was remastered by Bernie using the original master tapes. I don't know that for sure, I'm not 100% on that, but I'm assuming that it did. This has always been my reference, my go-to for this album. When I got this album in 1999 or 2000, whenever it was, I immediately compared that to original 1970 pressing that belonged to my sister. And it was very, very obvious that this Classic Records version was far superior. The 1970, and her records are actually in pretty good shape. It wasn't terrible, but in comparing that album, the original pressing sound somewhat veiled to me. In comparing it to this, things were just opened up. The veil was lifted off. It was clean. It was clear. It was very, very pure sounding compared to the original pressing. So this has always been really my reference for this album. And after really comparing it to these other two and spending some time going back and forth, in particular using the song Keep the Customer Satisfied, as well as the entire album, it probably, for sure, well, not probably, to me and through my system, it is the more natural sounding of the three. I would probably will think this will still be my reference, is the 1999 Classic Records version. It's not leaps and bounds better than either of these two. In fact, I think these two are awfully close. The only benefit that I would actually give the OneStep over the Classic Records is the super quiet vinyl. Not that the Classic Records vinyl is noisy, it is not. It's pretty darn quiet itself. But both of these have very, very, very quiet vinyl, and that background is pitch black dark on both of these, and so it sounds very, very nice. But I really do believe that the Classic Records version just has that more natural sound to me. The highs are extended, the bottoms are extended, they sound absolutely wonderful. Nowhere near going to the point where you're thinking, whoa, are we getting close to getting over the top? No way, shape, or form. It's perfect, literally perfect. Not by leaps and bounds is it better than these two. I just can't even begin to tell you that. The Mobile Fidelity OneStep is excellent. It is a fantastic rendering of this iconic 1970 album. And then this release is really, 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 really quite good. Even though those extended highs are up there just a bit, in particular on a couple of the songs, it really does work. And for $60 that you can get today, it's still available. This is really quite a good bargain. If you're a Simon and Garfunkel fan, love the song Bridge Over Troubled Water, love the album Bridge Over Troubled Water, you're not going to go wrong by picking this up. It's a great sounding album. The song in particular, Bridge Over Troubled Water, is wonderful. No over the top on this at all. The extended highs, at least in my opinion, on most of this album really, really works. It sounds very, very nice. I really, if I was pressed to rank them, I would probably rank the Classic Records as being number one for me. Very, very closely followed by the OneStep, and then of course this one. But in all honesty, the new release it's excellent. I'm super excited for the release. It should be getting shipped any day now of Simon and Garfunkel's Bookends. I'm excited to get that album from Mobile Fidelity and give that a listen and see how that sounds. But overall, this is a very nice sounding album. Just keep in mind the top end is extended and it mostly works. It really does. I can't tell you highly enough that for most of this album, it sounds great. It really sounds great. Just a couple of the songs where you're kind of getting, it's getting close to that top end, that sizzle point, but it doesn't get there, but it gets close. But really, a great album, highly recommended. Thank you so much for watching today. I appreciate each and every one of you. Upcoming video, we're going to be taking a look at a series of records that I have been using, artists that I've been introduced to me, new artists that I've really never heard of before, or in some cases have heard of, but have never really considered, but have been introduced to. We'll be looking at some of those albums as well as some albums that I have been using to really help me sort out and figure out a new set of speakers, and I'm really close to making that decision. So I want to share with you some of that music that's been really so instrumental and really been acting as a tool to helping me decide which set of speakers that I should buy. And so I'll kind of be looking forward to sharing that with you really quickly. One quick question for you, and please put your comments in the comment section below as well. Have you heard the latest announcement that Reveiw High Fidelity is releasing, as of today, this video is coming out, Graham Parsons' Grievous Angel on High Fidelity, Reveiw High Fidelity, as well as Emmylou Harris Luxury Liner. Those two titles were announced on Reveiw High Fidelity just this morning. I'd love to know if you guys are buying them. Let me know what you're thinking, if you've ordered them. I did go ahead and order them. I'm excited to review them with you when they get here. Thank you so much for watching today. Hope you have an absolute wonderful day. Please leave comments in the comment section below. As always, if you like what you see, please go ahead and subscribe. I appreciate that so very much. Until next time, have a wonderful day.